The USS Barb was one of the most highly decorated submarines in U.S. history. A Gato-class warship, led by Commander Eugene B. Fluckey, it is credited with having sunk 17 Japanese vessels that surpassed 96,000 tons. During its 3-year run during World War II, the submarine was awarded 6 Navy Crosses, 23 Silver Stars, and 23 Bronze Stars. However, it was one last special operation that earned it the Presidential Unit Citation. In late July of 1945, Commander Fluckey dispatched a squad of rookie Navy Reserve sailors to plant explosives on the railroad tie to the Japanese island of Karafuto. The 8 sailors were the first Americans to set foot on the Japanese home islands. But as they hit the shore, they inadvertently landed in a civilian backyard and had to improvise a new strategy. The unit was ultimately able to place the explosives and blow up the train, going down in history as the only time a US Naval submarine crew sank an enemy train. The USS Barb at war. American submarines proved their effectiveness during the Pacific theater of World War II. They emulated German tactics to sink Japanese warships and other pivotal objectives that crippled Japan's economy until its surrender in August 1945. After the Japanese bombed the American Pacific Fleet stationed at Pearl Harbor in December 1941, the Western forces rapidly recovered and retaliated with relentless momentum. Still, the Japanese were able to occupy the Philippines and almost every island in the Pacific, but their subsequent invasion plans were brought to an abrupt halt after the setback suffered in the Battle of Midway during the summer of 1942. The Japanese could not afford to risk their Imperial Navy in another open fight against the U.S. After the Allied victory at Guadalcanal in early 1943, General Douglas MacArthur knew that America would have to fight its way into mainland Japan by conquering and isolating every Japanese fortified island in the Pacific. And the U.S. Navy submarines would play a pivotal role in the operation. As part of the unified American strategy, submarine crews would patrol the Pacific on the hunt for enemy warships and supply convoys. The objective was to cut off sea supply lines that delivered goods to Imperial Army soldiers firmly dug in the Philippines, the Solomon Islands, and more importantly, the Sea of Japan. The USS Barb would be one of the submarines that joined the fight in the Pacific after conducting multiple war patrols in the Atlantic and Mediterranean. The Gato-class submarine was launched on April 2, 1942, and commissioned 3 months later. Its first war patrol happened on October 20th, on its way to a 3-year run until the war officially ended. During its 12 total patrols, the USS Barb initially fought in the European front, but was then summoned to the Pacific theater. By early 1945, it had sunk 17 enemy vessels worth 90,000 tons, one of the most formidable ruins of any submarine during World War II. Upon completion of its 11th war patrol, the Barb was upgraded with 130mm rocket launchers at the request of its commander, Eugene B. Fluckey. It became one of the first submarines to expand its arsenal with this type of weaponry. But it was its last war patrol, as the USS Barb was sent to the Sea of Japan, that would secure its place in the history books. A plan is hatched. On July 19, 1945, Commander Fluckey spotted a railroad running near the coastline of Otosamu in Patience Bay, Karafuto. During the following days, the commander analyzed the tracks and made a note of the train schedules. Fluckey observed trains bringing resources and war assets to transport ships, so he prepared a plan to cut off the supply line once and for all. The USS Barb could definitely handle sinking cargo ships at sea. During its previous war patrols, it had been able to outmaneuver the Japanese at ease. But Commander Fluckey thought, quote, "Why not get rid of the Japanese supplies before they were even loaded into the cargo ships? Why waste more time taking them down at sea when they could do it on land with one decisive blow?" Fluckey ordered a meeting in the war room and laid out his daring plan to the crew. A decisive blow on the train was the objective, but securing the Navy sailors' lives was pivotal. The few selected men could not just simply run straight into the tracks, plant the explosive charges, and wait for the train in order to detonate them. Japanese guards would swarm the area in minutes, and the shore party would be overrun and captured. No crew member had lost their life under Fluckey's command, and he wanted to keep it that way. A possible solution, and the key to the plan's success, came from electrician's mate 3rd Class Billy R. Hatfield. Commander Fluckey later wrote in his autobiography, Thunder Below, that Hatfield's solution was based on memories from his early years in Ohio. Hatfield recalled how he used to place nuts between railroad ties. When the rails sagged as the trains passed by, the shells cracked. Hatfield proposed creating a micro-switch placed between 2 ties to detonate the bomb. As the train passed by, the explosion would be triggered. Fluckey liked the idea and gave Hatfield the green light to build the device. The young engine man built a 55-pound bomb out of a scuttling charge that was wired to 3 dry cell batteries placed in a pickle can. The land torpedo was connected to the microswitch detonator that would be placed under the train rails. Hatfield offered to lead the shore party, but there was no shortage of volunteers. The men were eager to fight the Japanese and weaken their resources. According to Fluckey, even a Japanese prisoner volunteered to guide them. Commander Fluckey decided that 8 men would carry out the mission. Both Navy sailors and the reserves needed to be represented, but former Boy Scouts were also selected because of their survival capabilities. There was a likely chance that the squad could get lost in the wild terrains, and medical expertise was critical. Fluckey was eager to lead the operation, but the remaining officers threatened to call the Pacific Fleet's principal advisor if he left the ship. He was too valuable to risk, and he had to give in. A submarine crew blows out a train. At midnight on July 23, 1945, the USS Barb approached the coast under cover of darkness. The improvised Navy Special Force was split into 2 groups and approached the coast aboard 2 rubber boats. For most of them, this was their first time fighting outside the claustrophobic walls of a submarine. Before leaving the ship, Fluckey told the men that they would only wait for 3 hours before sunlight would expose the submarine. His last words to them were, quote, "Men, if you get stuck, head for Siberia, 130 miles north. Follow the mountain ranges." Lieutenant Bill Walker, the USS Barb's engineering officer, led the first group, while Chief Gunner's mate Paul G. Saunders and Hatfield led the other. The other crew members were signalman Francis Neil Sever, cook Larry Newland, torpedo man Edward Klingel Smith, and motor machinists Jim Richard and John Markison. The commando team was equipped with the explosive device, flashlights, binoculars, life jackets, signal guns, electrical wire, D-rations, M1 Garand rifles, and Thompson submachine guns. Upon reaching the coast, 2 men remained behind to guard the boats while the others ventured inland. Although they did not know it, these Navy sailors were the first Americans to set foot on the Japanese home islands. The squad first stumbled upon a Japanese residential house full of thick bulrushes that cracked with every move the men made. The lights turned on, but no one came out. The Americans quickly reorganized and continued their way towards the railroad. They then fell into a 4-foot ditch and ran across the road towards their target. A train suddenly passed, and the 6 men looked for cover. After the train had disappeared, they set to work. A sailor climbed on top of a water tower to look for approaching enemies. He was surprised to find out that it was an operated lookout post, but the Japanese soldier was asleep. He then went down and alerted the team to speed up. Once Hetfield planted the bomb, a dim light could be seen approaching. It was a train. The men immediately ran across the tracks and towards the beach. At 1:47 a.m., the 16-car train exploded into a burst of flames. 5 minutes later, the entire squad was back at the coast. Quote, "Paddle like the devil," shouted Fluckey as the men approached the submarine. The mission was a success, and the USS Barb continued its streak of not losing a single man during years of continuous combat. Its 12th war patrol ended on August 2, 1945, just days before the nuclear bombs on top of Hiroshima and Nagasaki prompted Japan to surrender. The USS Barb's battle flag shows an impressive amount of achievements. 12 war patrols, 5 of them in Europe and 7 in the Pacific, 6 Navy Crosses, 23 Silver Stars, 23 Bronze Stars, a Presidential Unit Citation, and a Medal of Honor awarded to Captain Commander Fluckey. However, the flag's most distinctive feature is a small icon located at its lower bottom, a train that symbolizes the USS Barb's unique feat, a masterstroke that no other submarine has achieved in US naval history.